Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a conversation the other day with someone when Brittany and I were at an event, and it reminded me that this is something that people oftentimes don't know about. The layperson doesn't know about, people who don't read or research don't always understand, and that is this idea of how cooking food affects both nutrient content and absorption, and how this varies from different foods. Because an individual had said, and I quote, "Well, I thought raw foods are more nutritious because cooking destroys the nutrients." And this is a myth based partially on truth because, yes, there are nutrients that are going to be destroyed, not necessarily completely destroyed, but reduced with cooking. Now, obviously, the longer you cook something, the more some nutrients are going to be destroyed. Like if you char and blacken anything till it looks like a pile of carbon, clearly you've destroyed just about all of the nutritional value. Not all of it, but pretty close to all of the nutritional value of that food, no matter what that food is. But there are a lot of foods that the actual nutritional content can not only be increased, but a lot of them to where you increase actual absorption. And that's something that people need to really understand when it comes to a nutritional perspective and an evolutionary perspective. Well, let me rephrase that. Do we really need to understand it? No. But sometimes it's just fun and nice to know things, and maybe depending on what you study in school, it might actually be applicable to your real life. Now, one of the things that we've noted is there are certain vitamins, like vitamin C, that do degrade with heat. So your broccoli or your oranges or whatever you're eating to get your vitamin C, you are going to break some of it down. As much as 30 or 40% of it could be broken down by the cooking process. However, something like broccoli, because you're pre-digesting it to a large extent with the cooking process, you make absorbing it easier and you make it easier to consume. For example, if you were to try to consume an entire pound of broccoli, is it easier to get that pound in if it's been cooked or steamed or cooked into another food, or if you eat it completely raw? Well, it's a lot easier to consume it if you eat it cooked because you have to chew it less. You have to chew it dramatically less, maybe 10 times less. It also sits easier in your stomach when it's cooked because, again, it's already been pre-digested. It's softer. It's not coarse, and it doesn't have all that fiber that hasn't been ground down a little bit by your teeth and everything. Again, it's part of the digestive process has already been completed with cooking. Now, what that also means, yeah, you lose some of the vitamins, some of the content, like maybe 30% of some of those vitamins is gone, but it doesn't affect the minerals. It doesn't affect the zinc, the iron, the copper, the potassium, the magnesium, things like that. Those all stay. But it does break down some of the vitamins. However, that also asks the question of how many of these vitamins do you really need? A lot of these plant foods that we have today are basically superfoods that contain more vitamin C, more vitamin A, all of these things than anything that we had in nature that we could find readily because we've bred these foods to contain very large amounts of nutrition. And furthermore, any of those vitamins that you're going to get from something like broccoli, if you were to eat a pound of cooked broccoli in a day, even with those nutrients broken down to some extent, losing some of them, you're going to consume more of it than you're going to use in a day. You're going to get very, very large amounts of these vitamins anyways from consuming such a large amount of it. And again, the other point is that you can absorb more of the other nutrients from it. When you have cooked it and you can consume more of it, again, you obviously can get more of those things by cooking it because you're eating a larger quantity easier. But also things like the proteins in a lot of plants, for example, are easier to absorb if they've been cooked. And that brings us to another point. There are certain foods that cooking it actually changes the protein profile that makes it more bioavailable. Like eggs, for example, is a perfect example of a food that are more readily bioavailable when you cook them. Well, how about meats? Meats, if you're trying to get all of the protein out of a meat, particularly a meat that has a lot of connective tissue in it, something that you need to roast or stew for long periods of time, you're going to break down all of that collagen into more gelatin. You're going to make it easier to extract the protein. Is it going to be a tremendous amount more? No, it's just going to be a little more. But that has a significant role, and we'll get to that in a minute as far as evolution goes. So the thing is, people will try to say things like, well, I don't understand because, there isn't fire in nature and it's just natural to eat your food uncooked. Well, that's actually not true. That is something that if you study a little bit of anthropology, you'll find out that humans actually are cooked food eaters. That's why we fill a unique niche in the ecosystem. That's why we seem to be able to thrive on such a wide diversity of foods. It's one of the biggest factors. We have not only a very diverse GI tract, we have a GI tract that can handle everything from meats to vegetables and everything. We're omnivorous in the nature of a digestive system, but also because we have been cooking for at least 1.9 million years. Homo sapien is only about 200,000 years old, but the previous species that we came from, it appeared that they were cooked food eaters going back 1.9 million years. They cooked everything. And one of the first things that they learned how to cook was tubers, roots, things that you would think of today like carrots, beets, onions, potatoes, any sort of tuber. They found out very quickly that if they cooked these things, they could eat them easier, they could eat more of them. That allowed them to get a lot more starches in, a lot more calories, a lot of potassium, a lot of magnesium, various minerals like that were hard to get sometimes from foods they could easily find. They could dig up tubers and roots and cook them. And when they cooked them, they not only tasted tremendously better, you could eat a lot more. And if you don't believe me, try to eat cooked carrots versus raw carrots, or cooked potatoes versus raw potatoes. It is very difficult to eat a significant amount of raw tubers of any type, but when you cook them, they taste better. And they found they could cook them into stews. You dig up any sort of roots like that and cook them into stews with meats, and you find that you get something that tastes pretty good. This is one of the first foods humans really learned how to cook well over 1 million years ago. Various roots and tubers mixed with water and meat, particularly sinewy meat, because when they killed animals back then, all through history, starvation was a real risk for human beings. So by cooking a lot of these foods, they were able to get more nutrition out of them, particularly the roots and tubers. They could get so much more nutrition by cooking it because they could digest it easier. They could eat more of it. They could get more of it in their system without feeling bloated and full and their stomach hurting and gastrointestinal distress. This gave you a much, much higher chance of surviving. And again, those meats, they're really hard to chew because all the sinew, which is going to be well over half of the meat on any big animal, it allowed them to create dishes that tasted great, that they could chew easy, that they could get more nutrition in. And we believe that this is one of the leading causes of how we became more intelligent. Because we were able to cook, we were able to get more essential fatty acids. We were able to get more calories. We were able to get more protein in, the things that we needed to build bigger brains. And because we were able to cook the food and get far more calories and nutrition from it, we didn't have to spend as much time trying to gather food and find food. We could spend time cooking. And the cooking didn't require us to always constantly monitor the food. We could work on other projects and problem solving. We could work on things besides being in a field grazing for 12 hours straight every day like a cow does. That allowed us more time to work on mentally stimulating projects and problem solving, and it gave us the nutrition to actually grow a much larger brain. So cooking actually for several reasons seems to be one of the reasons that we are more intelligent. And again, it allows us to get more nutrition in. So people who come up with these things and say, oh, raw foods are simply more nutritious, well, that's not true. Some raw foods will contain more vitamins, but when you cook other foods, it allows more absorption, and in some cases even increases the bioavailability of the proteins, and again lowers the risk of getting diseases and bacteria and other things, of getting certain types of food poisoning, because again you're killing bacteria with the cooking process as well. So overall, cooking food generally allows you to absorb more nutrients than it actually destroys. And it's not to say you shouldn't eat some raw foods. I mean, there are a lot of foods that taste better raw. There are a lot of foods that might actually have better nutrition raw because they're not hard to digest. For example, fruits is a perfect example. It's not very difficult to digest most fruits, so cooking them, you're not necessarily getting an advantage unless you just happen to enjoy a dish with cooked fruits in it. And you are breaking down some of the vitamins. So fruits would be an example of something that you're probably better off raw, but a lot of foods are going to be more nutritious in terms of breakdown. Grains, a lot of vegetables, most meats are going to actually be more nutritious and safer to eat in the long term if you were to cook them. So it's about finding a balance. And obviously things like salads and stuff, they're not necessarily going to give you more nutrition because again, cooking leafy greens allows you to absorb more from them, but they're going to fill you up more. So they're oftentimes used for satiety to help keep you full so that you'll eat less food. So things like salads, there can be health benefits, obviously, to consuming raw. But we need to throw this notion out that cooking is unnatural or anything like that, because humans have been cooking for a very long time. We speciated from a cooking species, and cooking appears to have been largely responsible for our development of our intelligence and becoming the species that we are now. And it allows for better overall nutrient absorption and nutrient content in your diet, even though in many cases it breaks down some of the vitamins. So it's important to keep that in mind. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.